The manila envelope sitting on my desk looked innocent enough, but in my line of work, I've learned that the most dangerous things usually do. 23 years selling insurance policies in Hartford, Connecticut, and I can smell trouble from 3 cubicles away. This particular trouble had my name written on it in Jenny Shore's shaky handwriting. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Calvin Mercer, and if you're wondering what kind of man spends his days calculating actuarial tables and explaining deductibles to people who'd rather be anywhere else, the answer is simple. The kind who pays attention to details, the kind who notices when his wife of 15 years starts wearing new underwear that didn't come from Target, the kind who knows the difference between a legitimate claim and a scam. Right now, staring at that envelope while my computer screen blinked with another open enrollment period reminder, I was pretty sure I was about to become both the investigator and the victim of the biggest fraud case of my career. Calvin, you look like someone pissed in your coffee. Neil Rodriguez dropped into the chair across from my desk, his tie already loosened at 10:30 in the morning. Neil's been my closest friend since we started working at Hartwell Insurance on the same day back in 2001. He's also the only person in this office who can make me laugh when I want to throw my computer through the window. Worse, I said, tapping the envelope. Someone pissed in my marriage. Neil's eyebrows shot up. Lydia? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from my wife. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. L. The formal sign-off was new, so was the working late part. Lydia managed a small accounting firm across town, the kind of place where working late meant staying until 5:15 to finish the monthly reports. But for the past 3 months, she'd been pulling these mysterious late nights 2 or 3 times a week. Let me ask you something, Neil. If your wife suddenly started buying lingerie from Victoria's Secret instead of Walmart, what would you think? I'd think my birthday came early. Neil grinned, then caught my expression. Or I'd think she's trying to impress someone who isn't me. Bingo! I picked up the envelope. Jenny Shore walked in here 20 minutes ago, handed me this, and said, 3 months. Kids, I can't let him leave. Make them pay. Then she walked out before I could say a word. Neil leaned forward. Jenny Shore was married to Evan Shore, who worked in commercial real estate downtown. Nice guy, or so I'd thought. Their kids went to the same school district as half our office. You open it yet? Waiting for the right moment, I glanced around the office. Our cubicle sat in the middle of the floor, surrounded by the usual insurance office chaos. Claim adjusters arguing on phones, underwriters squinting at computer screens, and the constant hum of people trying to make other people's problems go away for a monthly premium. Calvin? My boss, Richard Evers, appeared at my cubicle entrance. Evers was the kind of manager who wore his authority like an ill-fitting suit, always adjusting it to make sure you noticed. Everything all right? Mrs. Shore seemed upset when she left. Client matter, I said smoothly. Nothing I can't handle. Evers nodded and moved on. The man had the attention span of a goldfish, which worked in my favor most days. Neil waited until Evers was out of earshot. Open it. I slid my finger under the envelope flap. Inside were printouts of text messages, hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and photographs. Lots of photographs. The first text message was from my wife to Evan Shore, dated 2 weeks ago. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Calvin's working late. Come over at 8. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I'd always wondered how I'd react to something like this, and apparently the answer was cold calculation. The hotel receipts were all charged to my credit card. The Marriott downtown, the Hampton Inn by the airport, even a weekend at the Mohegan Sun Casino that Lydia had told me was a girls' trip with her sister. Jesus Christ, Calvin. Neil was reading over my shoulder. How long has this been going on? I flipped through more receipts. Dinner at Romano's Italian, our anniversary restaurant. Drinks at the Hilton bar where I'd proposed to her. Lingerie purchases, cologne, even a pair of expensive cufflinks I'd never seen Evan wear. 3 months, according to Jenny. I found my voice somewhere between my stomach and my throat. Maybe longer. The photographs were the worst part. Not because they were explicit, they weren't, but because they were intimate. Lydia laughing at something Evan said over dinner. Lydia's hand on Evan's chest in what looked like a hotel elevator. Lydia wearing the red dress I'd bought her for her birthday, but she was wearing it for him. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? 23 years in insurance had taught me that when someone files a claim, you investigate. You gather evidence, you determine liability, and then you make sure the responsible party pays. I'm going to make them pay, I said, sliding the papers back into the envelope. But not the way Jenny thinks. Neil frowned. What do you mean? I looked around the office again. Sandra Martinez from Claims was gossiping with Rebecca Walsh from Underwriting. Tom Bradley was arguing with someone about a denied auto claim. Normal Tuesday morning chaos. You know what the problem is with most people who get cheated on? They react emotionally, they scream, they cry, they throw things, they make it about feelings. It is about feelings? No. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. I could see Lydia's Honda Civic in the visitor's space where she'd parked it this morning when she dropped off my lunch, a lunch that was probably an excuse to meet Evan somewhere. It's about fraud. She's been using my credit cards to fund her affair. That's theft. She's been lying about her whereabouts, which violates our marriage contract, and she's been exposing me to potential health risks without my knowledge or consent. Neil stared at me. You're talking about your wife like she's an insurance claim. Because that's exactly what she is. I turned back to face him. A fraudulent claim that needs to be investigated, documented, and denied. My computer chimed with an email. Lydia sending me her schedule for the week. According to the email, she had a client dinner Thursday night that would run late. According to the hotel receipt in the envelope, she'd already booked a room at the Marriott for Thursday night. Calvin, maybe you should talk to someone, a counselor, or... I am talking to someone. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found what I was looking for. I'm talking to David Foster, the best divorce attorney in Hartford County. I hit the call button and waited. When David's secretary answered, I said, This is Calvin Mercer. I need to schedule an appointment with Mr. Foster as soon as possible. It's regarding a divorce case with significant asset protection concerns. Neil was still staring at me when I hung up. Appointment's at 3 o'clock, I said, right after I make copies of everything in this envelope and start documenting every fraudulent transaction on my credit cards for the past 6 months. You're scaring me a little bit, Calvin. I sat back down and opened my desk drawer. Inside was a small digital recorder I used for client interviews. I'd bought it 2 years ago when we started handling more complex commercial claims. You know what scares me, Neil? The fact that my wife has been planning this for months. The fact that she's been laughing at me with her boyfriend while spending my money on hotel rooms. The fact that she probably thinks I'm too stupid or too weak to figure it out. I slipped the recorder into my shirt pocket and turned it on. What's that for? Evidence. From now on, every conversation I have with Lydia gets recorded. Every text message gets screenshot. Every lie gets documented. I looked at the envelope again. She wants to play games? Fine. But she's playing against someone who investigates fraud for a living. My phone buzzed with another text from Lydia. Forgot to mention, having drinks with the girls after work. Might be really late. Love you. I showed the message to Neil. See that? She just lied to me in writing, and I can prove it. How? I opened my laptop and logged into our joint credit card account. Because 30 minutes ago, she used our card to buy gas at the Shell station on Route 9. That's nowhere near her office, but it's exactly halfway between her office and Evan's house. Neil whistled low. You really are going to treat this like an insurance investigation. Better. Insurance investigations have rules and regulations. This is personal. I started printing out the credit card statements. And the best part? She has no idea I know, which means she's going to keep digging herself deeper while I build my case. The printer hummed as it spit out 3 months of credit card records. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, gas stations, retail purchases. A complete paper trail of my wife's affair, paid for with my money. Calvin, what's the end game here? You can't just destroy your wife. I looked at him. Neil was a good friend, but he'd never been married. He didn't understand that Lydia had already destroyed our marriage. I was just documenting the damage. The end game is making sure that when this is over, everyone knows exactly who Lydia Mercer really is. Her family, her friends, her co-workers, everyone. I gathered the printed statements and slipped them into a folder. She wants to humiliate me. She's about to learn what real humiliation feels like. My desk phone rang. The caller ID showed Lydia's office number. Calvin Mercer. Hi, honey, it's me. Lydia's voice was bright and cheerful, the same voice that had been lying to me for months. I just wanted to confirm that you're okay with me working late tonight. I know we talked about watching that movie. I pressed record on the digital recorder. Of course, sweetheart. Work comes first. What kind of project are you working on? Oh, just some year-end reconciliation stuff. Really boring accounting work. I'll probably be here until at least 9. That's dedication. Well, don't work too hard. I love you. Love you too. See you when I get home? I hung up and stopped the recording. Let me guess, Neil said. She's not working late on accounting stuff. According to this hotel receipt, she's working late on Evan Shore. I held up the paper. Room 412 at the Marriott, reserved for tonight, charged to my Visa card this morning. Neil shook his head. This is going to get ugly. I looked at the envelope, the credit card statements, and the recorded conversation on my phone. Evidence, documentation, proof. Neil, my friend, I said, you have no idea how ugly this is going to get. David Foster's law office occupied the top floor of a converted Victorian mansion on Asylum Avenue, which I'd always thought was an appropriate street name for a divorce attorney's practice. Foster himself was a thin, sharp-dressed man in his 50s who'd built his reputation on high-conflict divorce cases and asset protection strategies. Mr. Mercer, I've reviewed the materials you provided. Foster sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my car, the envelope's contents spread out in front of him like evidence at a crime scene. This is quite comprehensive documentation. 23 years in insurance claims investigation, I said. I know how to build a case. Indeed, the question is, what outcome are you seeking? Reconciliation, mediation, or total warfare? I'd been thinking about that question since leaving the office. On the drive over, I'd stopped at 3 different banks and opened new accounts, transferring my direct deposit and half of our joint savings into accounts that only I could access. Legal, according to Connecticut law, as long as I didn't take more than 50%. I want her to lose everything, I said. Her reputation, her job, her family's respect, her financial security. I want her to understand exactly what it costs to betray someone who trusted her completely. Chen nodded like I'd just ordered coffee. Vindictive divorce. I can work with that. Connecticut is a no-fault state, but adultery can still impact alimony decisions, especially when marital assets were used to fund the affair. He picked up one of the hotel receipts. These charges to your credit card establish a clear pattern of financial misconduct. What about her job? She works at Morrison & Associates, small accounting firm. Very conservative clientele. Adultery isn't grounds for termination unless it directly impacts job performance or violates company policy. Foster smiled thinly. However, if her employer became aware of financial irregularities or ethical concerns, such as using company resources for personal matters, falsifying time records, anything that calls her professional integrity into question. Foster leaned back in his leather chair. Of course, I couldn't advise you to manufacture such evidence, but if such evidence already existed, I understood. Foster was a lawyer, which meant he spoke in hypotheticals and implications, but I was an insurance investigator, which meant I spoke in facts and documentation. What about the boyfriend? Evan Shore. I know his employer, Meridian Commercial Real Estate. They have a strict morality clause in their employee handbook. Affairs with married clients or business associates can result in immediate termination. Lydia isn't his client? No, but you are. Your company carries a commercial policy with Meridian for your office building. Mr. Shore was the agent who sold you that policy 3 years ago. Foster shuffled through some papers. Which means his affair with your wife could be considered a violation of professional ethics and client trust. I hadn't known about the business connection. That was useful information. Timeline? File for divorce immediately. Connecticut requires a 90-day waiting period, but we can use that time to gather additional evidence and prepare for asset division hearings. Foster pulled out a legal pad. I'll need you to document every marital asset, every joint account, every shared debt. And I'll need you to be absolutely certain you want to pursue this course of action. Why? Because once we file these papers and start this process, there's no going back. Your wife will know you know. She'll lawyer up, probably claim emotional distress, maybe even file a restraining order if she feels threatened. Foster's expression was serious. Are you prepared for her to become your enemy? I thought about Lydia's text message from this morning, the lie about working late, the hotel room she'd booked with my credit card. She became my enemy 3 months ago. I'm just evening the odds. Chen smiled. Then let's get started. 2 hours later, I walked out of Foster's office with a thick folder of legal documents and a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. The divorce papers would be filed tomorrow morning. By tomorrow afternoon, Lydia would be served at her office in front of her coworkers during their weekly staff meeting. But first, I had a stop to make. Morrison & Associates occupied a small office building on Farmington Avenue, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. I'd been there exactly twice in the 15 years Lydia had worked there, once for her Christmas party and once to pick her up when her car was in the shop. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, who couldn't have been more than 25, looked up when I walked in. Mr. Mercer, how nice to see you. Are you here to pick up Lydia? Actually, I was hoping to speak with Mr. Morrison. Is he available? Let me check. Ashley picked up her phone. Mr. Morrison? Lydia's husband is here to see you. Okay, I'll send him back. James Morrison was a heavy-set man in his 60s who'd built his accounting practice on personal relationships and old-fashioned service. His office was decorated with family photos and civic awards, the kind of man who probably still went to the same barber he'd used for 30 years. Calvin, good to see you. How can I help you? I sat down across from his desk and pulled out a folder. Jim, I need to ask you about Lydia's work schedule, specifically her recent overtime hours. Morrison frowned. Overtime? We don't really do overtime here. Most of our staff works regular business hours unless we're in tax season. So if Lydia told me she was working late on year-end reconciliation projects, that would be unusual? Very unusual. We finished our year-end work in January. Morrison's frown deepened. Calvin, is everything all right? You look troubled. I opened the folder and pulled out copies of the hotel receipts and text messages. Jim, I'm going to share something with you in confidence, and I need you to understand that I'm not here to cause problems for your business, but I think you should know what's been happening. Morrison's face went pale as he read through the evidence. The hotel charges on nights when Lydia claimed to be working late. The text messages arranging meetings during business hours. The pattern of deception that had been going on for months. My God, Morrison whispered. Calvin, I had no idea. She's been telling us she was leaving early for family obligations, doctor appointments, your mother's care, things like that. My mother's been gone for 5 years. Morrison set down the papers. What do you need from me? I need you to document her actual work hours for the past 3 months. Time in, time out, any personal calls or visitors during business hours. And I need you to be prepared for the possibility that this situation might become public. Public how? Divorce proceedings. Possible fraud charges related to the misuse of credit cards. The kind of publicity that might make your clients uncomfortable. Morrison understood. His accounting firm depended on trust and reputation. Having an employee involved in a messy adultery scandal wouldn't be good for business. I'll pull her time records, Morrison said quietly. And Calvin, I'm sorry this happened to you. I drove home through the late afternoon traffic, my mind already working on the next phase of the plan. The legal strategy was in motion. The financial assets were protected. Now it was time for the social consequences. Lydia's car wasn't in the driveway when I got home, which meant she was probably already at the Marriott with Evan. Our house was a modest colonial in West Hartford, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names and everyone's business was public knowledge. I walked next door to the Hendersons' house and knocked on the door. Margaret Henderson answered, a woman in her 70s who'd lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else. Calvin, how lovely to see you. Come in, come in. Margaret's living room overlooked our driveway, and she had a habit of keeping track of everyone's comings and goings. In most circumstances, this would be annoying. Today, it was useful. Margaret, I need to ask you about something, and I hope you'll keep this between us for now. Of course, dear. What is it? Have you noticed any unusual activity at our house lately? Cars you don't recognize? People coming and going when I'm not home? Margaret's eyes lit up. She'd been waiting for this conversation. Well, now that you mention it, there has been a man coming by fairly regularly. Drives a blue BMW, usually parks in your driveway around lunchtime when you're at work. I assumed he was a friend of Lydia's. Can you describe him? Tall, dark hair, well-dressed. Handsome man, I suppose. He usually stays for an hour or two. Margaret paused. Calvin, is everything all right? You seem upset. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo from Evan Shore's LinkedIn profile. Is this the man you've been seeing? Margaret's face fell. Oh, Calvin. Oh, my dear boy. How long has this been going on? 3 months, maybe 4. I didn't think anything of it at first, but then I noticed he only came when you weren't home, and Lydia never mentioned having a friend over. Margaret trailed off. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. I put my phone away. Margaret, would you be willing to write down what you've observed? Dates, times, anything you can remember? Of course. That poor Jenny Shore. She must be devastated. You know Jenny? We're in the same book club at the library. She's been beside herself for weeks, but she wouldn't say why. Margaret shook her head. Now I understand. I left Margaret's house with a promise that she'd have a written statement ready by tomorrow morning. The neighborhood intelligence network was now activated, and by this time tomorrow, every house on our street would know exactly what Lydia had been doing. Back home, I sat in my kitchen and made a list of everyone who needed to know the truth. Lydia's parents, who lived in nearby Simsbury and still thought their daughter was happily married. Lydia's sister Karen, who lived in Boston and called every Sunday to chat about family news. Lydia's college friends, who still got together twice a year for reunion dinners. My phone buzzed with a text from Lydia. Still at the office. This project is taking forever. Don't wait up for dinner. I checked the time. 6:47 p.m. According to the hotel receipt, she'd checked into room 412 at 3:30 this afternoon. I typed back, "No problem. I'll grab something on the way home from my appointment. Love you." Then I drove to the Marriott. The hotel bar had a clear view of the elevator bank, and I found a corner table where I could watch without being seen. At 7:15, Lydia and Evan emerged from the elevator, laughing about something as they walked toward the restaurant. Lydia was wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. Her hair was styled differently, more sophisticated than her usual look. She looked beautiful, happy, and completely comfortable with the man who wasn't her husband. I took photos with my phone, Lydia touching Evan's arm as they talked to the hostess. Evan's hand on the small of Lydia's back as they walked to their table. Two people who were clearly intimate, clearly comfortable with each other, clearly not worried about being seen together. After 20 minutes, I left the hotel and drove to Evan Shore's house in Glastonbury. It was a large colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn and a Shore family sign by the front door. Jenny's minivan was in the driveway, along with bicycles and soccer equipment that belonged to their two kids. I knocked on the door, and Jenny answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the window. "Calvin, did you look at everything?" "I did, and I want you to know that we're going to make this right." Jenny's eyes filled with tears. "What does that mean?" "It means that by this time next week, your husband and my wife are going to understand exactly what it costs to destroy two families for their own selfish pleasure." I handed her a business card for David Foster. "Call this attorney tomorrow morning. Tell him I referred you. He specializes in high-conflict divorce cases, and he's very good at making sure the innocent party gets everything they deserve." "I can't afford an expensive lawyer." "You can, after he's done with your husband." I looked at the family photos visible through the front window. "Jenny, your kids deserve better than a father who abandons them for another man's wife. And you deserve better than a husband who thinks his marriage vows are optional." "What are you going to do?" I thought about Lydia in that black dress, laughing with Evan in the hotel restaurant, using my credit card to pay for their romantic dinner while I sat at home like a fool. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows who they really are," I said, "and then I'm going to watch their perfect little fantasy world burn to the ground." The process server found Lydia at Morrison & Associates during their Thursday morning staff meeting, exactly as I'd planned. According to Ashley, the receptionist who called to give me the play-by-play, Lydia's face went white when she read the divorce papers, and she excused herself to the bathroom where she could be heard crying through the door. I was sitting in my office, pretending to review a commercial liability claim when Neil dropped into the chair across from my desk. "So it's really happening. Filed yesterday. She should be getting served right about now." I glanced at my watch. 10:47 a.m. David Foster's process server is very punctual. "How do you feel?" That was an interesting question. How did I feel? For the past 3 months, I'd been living with a constant knot in my stomach, the nagging sense that something was wrong, but not knowing what. Now that I knew the truth and had taken action, I felt calm, focused, like an insurance investigator who'd finally cracked a difficult case. "I feel like I'm doing my job," I said. My phone rang. Lydia's name appeared on the caller ID. "Calvin Mercer." "Calvin." Lydia's voice was shaky, desperate. "What is this? These papers? They're saying you want a divorce. This has to be some kind of mistake." I pressed record on the digital recorder. "No mistake, Lydia. I know about Evan." Silence. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." Room 412 at the Marriott. Romano's Italian restaurant. The red lingerie you bought at Victoria's Secret with my credit card. Should I continue? More silence. I could hear her breathing, probably trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I could prove. "Calvin, we need to talk. Can you come home? Can we discuss this like adults?" "We can discuss it through our attorneys. I believe you'll be hearing from David Foster's office soon." "Our attorneys? Calvin, you're scaring me. This isn't like you." "You're right. The old Calvin would have confronted you emotionally, given you a chance to lie your way out of it, maybe even believed your excuses. But the old Calvin didn't know his wife was a fraud." "A fraud? Calvin, I made a mistake. I know I hurt you, but calling me a fraud... You used my credit cards to fund your affair. You lied about your whereabouts repeatedly. You exposed me to potential health risks without my knowledge or consent. In insurance terms, that's fraud, breach of contract, and reckless endangerment." I kept my voice calm, professional. "The fact that we're married doesn't make it legal." Jesus Christ, Calvin, I'm your wife, not an insurance claim. Not anymore. Check your credit cards, by the way. I canceled them this morning. I hung up and turned off the recorder. Neil was staring at me. That was cold, man. Even for you. Cold is spending 3 months planning an affair while your husband pays for it. I saved the recorded conversation to my computer and backed it up to a secure cloud account. Cold is lying to someone's face every day while you're sleeping with their friend. My desk phone rang. Richard Evers. Calvin, could you come to my office, please? There's been a development. Evers' office was a glass-walled fishbowl overlooking the main floor. When I walked in, he gestured for me to close the door. Calvin, I just got a very interesting phone call from Meridian Commercial Real Estate. Apparently there's been an allegation of professional misconduct involving one of their agents and a client's wife. Is that so? The allegation came from the client himself. Seems this agent has been having an inappropriate relationship with the client's wife, possibly using confidential client information to facilitate the relationship. Evers sat down behind his desk. The client is you, isn't it? I may have mentioned to Meridian's management that I was concerned about their agent's professional conduct. Calvin, Evan Shore sold us our commercial policy. If there's a conflict of interest or ethical violation, then Meridian will need to assign us a new agent and possibly review any confidential information Shore had access to. I sat down across from Evers. I'm sure they'll handle it appropriately. Evers nodded slowly. And your wife? Will no longer be a factor in any business relationships. By noon, the office gossip network was in full swing. Sandra Martinez had heard from her friend at Morrison & Associates that Lydia had been served with divorce papers. Rebecca Walsh had heard from someone at Meridian that Evan Shore was being investigated for ethics violations. Tom Bradley, who lived in my neighborhood, had heard from Margaret Henderson that there had been suspicious activity at the Mercer house for months. I ate lunch at my desk and waited for the next domino to fall. At 2:30 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Calvin, this is Evan Shore. We need to talk. No, we don't. Listen to me, you snake. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you're destroying innocent people. I pressed record. Innocent people? That's interesting. Tell me, Evan, how innocent were you when you were sleeping with my wife in hotel rooms that I paid for? That's between Lydia and me. You had no right to involve my employer, my wife, my kids. Your wife involved me when she handed me evidence of your affair. Your employer involved themselves when they decided to hire agents with questionable ethics. Your kids involved themselves when they chose a father who thinks marriage vows are optional. You're a sick bastard, you know that? This is about revenge, not justice. You're right, it is about revenge. But here's the thing about revenge, Evan. It only works when the other person actually did something wrong. I paused. Did you do something wrong? Screw you. That's what you said to my marriage. Now you get to live with the consequences. Evan hung up. I saved the recording and added it to my growing evidence file. At 4 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Dorothy Rowan, Lydia's mother. Calvin, honey, what's going on? Lydia called me crying, saying you filed for divorce. She says there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Dorothy Rowan was a sweet woman in her 70s who treated me like a son since the day Lydia brought me home from college. This conversation was going to hurt, but it was necessary. Dorothy, there's no misunderstanding. Lydia has been having an affair for the past 3 months. I have documentation, photographs, and recorded evidence. I'm sorry you have to hear this, but I thought you should know the truth. Silence. Then, an affair? Calvin, that's impossible. Lydia would never. I'm going to email you some documents. I want you to look at them, and then I want you to ask Lydia to explain the hotel receipts, the text messages, and the credit card charges. Ask her to explain why she's been lying to her employer about working late. Ask her to explain why the neighbors have been seeing another man at our house when I'm at work. Calvin, you're frightening me. I'm sorry, Dorothy. I know this is hard to hear, but Lydia made her choices, and now everyone has to live with the consequences. I hung up and immediately sent Dorothy an email with copies of the most damning evidence. Hotel receipts, text messages, credit card statements, everything she needed to understand that her daughter wasn't the victim in this situation. By 5 p.m., I'd received 3 more phone calls. Karen, Lydia's sister, demanding to know what was wrong with me. Steve Rowan, Lydia's father, asking if there was anything that could be worked out. And surprisingly, James Morrison, calling to inform me that Lydia had requested the rest of the week off due to family emergency. Jim, I want you to know that I appreciate your discretion in this matter. Calvin, I've been in business for 30 years. I've seen situations like this before. Morrison's voice was tired. I'm sorry it happened to you, but I'm glad you found out. Living a lie isn't good for anyone. What happens now with Lydia's employment? Honestly, I'm going to have to let her go. Not because of the affair, but because of the dishonesty. She's been falsifying time records, lying about her whereabouts, using company resources for personal matters. I can't have that kind of behavior in my office. I understand. Calvin, can I give you some advice? From someone who's been married for 42 years? Of course. Don't let this make you bitter. What Lydia did was wrong, but don't let her mistakes poison the rest of your life. You're a good man. You deserve better than this. After I hung up, I sat in my office and looked out at the Hartford skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere out there, Lydia was probably trying to figure out how to salvage her life. Evan was probably trying to explain to his wife why he was about to lose his job. And I was sitting here, methodically destroying both of them with nothing more than the truth. Neil appeared at my cubicle. You heading home? In a minute. I'm waiting for one more phone call. As if on cue, my phone rang. Jenny Shore. Calvin, I called that attorney you recommended. Mr. Foster is going to represent me. Good. How are you holding up? Better than I expected. Evan came home an hour ago, packed a suitcase, and left. He's been suspended from work pending an investigation. He tried to blame you for ruining his life. What did you tell him? I told him that you didn't ruin his life. He ruined his life. You just made sure everyone found out about it. I smiled. Jenny Shore was stronger than I'd given her credit for. What happens now? She asked. Now we let the legal system work. Foster will make sure you get everything you're entitled to. Custody, alimony, asset division, the works. And Evan will learn that actions have consequences. And Lydia? I thought about that question. What would happen to Lydia? She'd lose her job, her marriage, her family's respect, and most of her financial security. She'd become the cautionary tale that other wives whispered about at book clubs and coffee shops. The woman who threw away 15 years of marriage for a few months of excitement. Lydia will get exactly what she deserves, I said. Nothing more, nothing less. After I hung up, I gathered my files and prepared to leave the office. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new consequences, new opportunities to make sure the truth stayed visible. But tonight, I was going home to a house that would probably be empty, to eat dinner alone, to sleep in a bed that no longer held any lies. And for the first time in 3 months, I was looking forward to it. Friday morning brought the kind of October rain that makes Hartford look like a noir film, all gray shadows and slick streets. I'd slept better than I had in months, probably because I was finally sleeping alone in my own bed instead of next to someone who'd been lying to me every night. Lydia's car wasn't in the driveway when I left for work, which meant she'd either spent the night somewhere else or left very early to avoid seeing me. Either way, it saved us both an uncomfortable conversation. Neil was waiting at my desk when I arrived, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd been up half the night thinking. You look like hell, I said, accepting the coffee. I've been thinking about what you're doing, this whole revenge thing. Neil sat down and leaned forward. Calvin, I'm worried you're going too far. Too far how? You've destroyed her job, her marriage, her relationship with her family. You've gotten Evan suspended from work and probably cost him his marriage too. At what point does justice become cruelty? I turned on my computer and opened my email. 17 new messages, including one from David Foster with an update on the divorce proceedings, and another from Margaret Henderson with a detailed timeline of Evan's visits to my house. Neil, let me ask you something. If someone stole your car, crashed it into a school bus full of children, and then blamed you for leaving the keys where they could find them, would you feel sorry for them when they got arrested? That's not the same thing. Isn't it? Lydia stole my marriage, crashed it into another family, and now she's blaming me for finding out about it. I opened Foster's email and scanned the legal update. The only difference is that what she did was legal, which is why I have to get creative with the consequences. My desk phone rang. Richard Evers. Calvin, I need you in my office, now. Evers' office felt different this morning. Tenser. When I walked in, he gestured for me to close the door and sit down. Calvin, I got a call this morning from corporate. Apparently there's been a complaint filed against you. What kind of complaint? Harassment, intimidation, abuse of company resources. Evers pulled out a folder. The complaint alleges that you've been using your position here to gather personal information about clients, that you've been making threatening phone calls, and that you've been creating a hostile work environment. Who filed the complaint? Lydia Mercer. I laughed. actually laughed out loud, which seemed to surprise Evers. "Richard, my wife filed a complaint against me for investigating her adultery. Do you see the irony in that? Calvin, this is serious. Corporate is sending someone down to investigate. They want to review your computer, your phone records, your case files. If they find evidence that you've been misusing company resources, they'll find evidence that I discovered my wife was committing fraud using my credit cards, and I documented it properly." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder containing all my evidence. They'll also find that every action I've taken has been legal, ethical, and well within my rights as both a fraud investigator and a betrayed husband. Evers looked at the phone screen, scrolling through hotel receipts and text messages. His expression shifted from concern to understanding. "Jesus, Calvin, how long has this been going on?" 3 months that I can prove, possibly longer. I put the phone away. "Richard, I've been with this company for 23 years. I've never had a disciplinary action, never had a complaint, never given you a reason to doubt my professionalism. Are you really going to let my cheating wife destroy my career too? What do you need from me? I need you to tell corporate that you've reviewed the situation and found no evidence of wrongdoing. I need you to make it clear that this is a domestic dispute, not a workplace issue. And I need you to trust that I know the difference between personal revenge and professional responsibility." Evers nodded slowly. "And if corporate insists on an investigation, then they'll find that I'm very good at my job and that being betrayed by my wife hasn't changed that." I stood up. "But I don't think it'll come to that. Lydia's desperate, and desperate people make bad decisions. This complaint is going to backfire on her." I was right. By noon, word had spread through the office that Lydia had tried to get me fired for discovering her affair. The gossip network that had been merely interested in our divorce suddenly became actively hostile toward her. Sandra Martinez stopped by my desk around lunchtime. "Calvin, I hope you know that everyone here is on your side. What Lydia did was disgusting, and trying to get you fired for finding out about it is even worse." "I appreciate that, Sandra. My sister works at Morrison and Associates. She says Lydia's been fired." "I heard." "Good. Actions have consequences." Sandra paused. "Calvin, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "How did you stay so calm through all this? If my husband cheated on me, I'd have burned his clothes in the front yard and posted the videos on Facebook." I thought about that question. How had I stayed calm? The answer was that I hadn't, really. I'd been furious, hurt, betrayed, and humiliated. But I'd channeled all of that emotion into cold, calculated action. "Sandra, revenge is like insurance investigation. If you let your emotions drive the process, you make mistakes. You miss evidence, you draw wrong conclusions, you let the guilty party escape consequences." I pulled up the folder on my computer containing all my documentation. But if you stay objective, if you treat it like a case to be solved rather than a wound to be healed, you can build something that will stand up in court and in the court of public opinion. You're talking about your marriage like it was a business transaction. Because that's what it became the moment Lydia decided to start lying to me. She turned our relationship into a fraud case. I just decided to investigate it properly. That afternoon, I received a call from Dorothy Rowan. Lydia's mother sounded like she'd been crying. "Calvin, I looked at those documents you sent me. I confronted Lydia about them." "What did she say?" "She admitted it, all of it. The affair, the lies, the money." Dorothy's voice broke. "Calvin, I'm so sorry. I raised her better than this." "Dorothy, this isn't your fault." "Isn't it? Somewhere along the way, I failed to teach her that marriage means something, that promises matter, that you can't just throw away 15 years of love because you're bored or restless or whatever she was." I felt a pang of sympathy for Dorothy. She was a good woman who'd raised what she thought was a good daughter. Finding out that your child is capable of sustained deception and betrayal had to be devastating. "What happens now with your family?" "Steve and I have decided that Lydia isn't welcome in our home until she gets help. Real help. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes to figure out why she thought this was acceptable." Dorothy paused. "Calvin, I know you probably never want to see any of us again, but I want you to know that you'll always be family to us. What Lydia did doesn't change that." After I hung up, I sat quietly for a few minutes. Dorothy's call had been unexpected. In all my planning for revenge and consequences, I hadn't really considered the collateral damage to people who genuinely cared about both of us. But then I thought about Jenny Shore's children, who were going to grow up in a broken home because their father couldn't keep his marriage vows. I thought about the lies, the deception, the months of being made to feel like a fool in my own marriage, and I remembered that I wasn't the one who'd chosen to hurt innocent people. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Calvin, this is Lydia. I'm staying at a hotel. We need to talk. Please? I typed back, all communication goes through our attorneys. Calvin, please. I know I hurt you, but this has gone too far. I lost my job. My parents won't speak to me. Evan won't return my calls. You've destroyed my entire life. You destroyed your own life. I just made sure everyone found out about it. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. That doesn't mean I deserve to lose everything. I stared at that message for a long time. Lydia still didn't understand. She thought this was about punishment for a mistake, like she'd forgotten to pay a bill or scratched my car. She didn't understand that this was about justice for a betrayal, for months of calculated deception, for turning me into a fool in my own marriage. Lydia, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. Every hotel reservation, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye and pretended to love me while you were planning to meet him. Those were choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. You're destroying me. No, I'm revealing you. There's a difference. She didn't respond to that, and I didn't expect her to. The truth has a way of ending conversations. At 5 p.m., I packed up my desk and prepared to leave for the weekend. Neil stopped by as I was gathering my files. Any plans for the weekend? I'm going to clean out Lydia's belongings and put them in storage. Change the locks, maybe paint the bedroom. I looked at him. What about you? Dinner with my girlfriend, probably a movie. Normal weekend stuff. Neil paused. Calvin, are you okay? I mean, really okay? I'm better than I've been in months, Neil. For the first time since this whole thing started, I know exactly where I stand and what's going to happen next. Which is? Lydia and Evan are going to learn that actions have consequences. Their families are going to learn who they really are. And I'm going to move on with my life, knowing that I handled this situation with dignity and intelligence. And if they try to fight back, if they escalate things? I thought about that question as I walked to my car. Lydia had already tried to get me fired, which had backfired spectacularly. Evan had tried to threaten me, which I'd recorded and added to my evidence file. What else could they do? The answer, I realized, was probably something stupid and desperate, which was fine with me. I'd built my case carefully, documented everything, and stayed within legal bounds. If they wanted to escalate things, they'd be doing it from a position of weakness while I held all the evidence. As I drove home through the rainy Hartford streets, I found myself looking forward to the weekend. For the first time in months, I'd be able to relax in my own house without wondering where my wife really was or who she was really with. The truth, it turned out, was incredibly liberating. Monday morning brought the kind of crisp November air that makes you believe in fresh starts. I'd spent the weekend methodically removing all traces of Lydia from our house, boxing up her clothes, her books, her photographs, and storing them in the garage. The locksmith had come Saturday afternoon to change all the locks. By Sunday evening, the house felt like mine again. I was reviewing a workers' compensation claim when Neil arrived at my desk, carrying coffee and wearing an expression I'd learned to recognize as incoming drama. Calvin, we need to talk, privately. We found an empty conference room, and Neil closed the door behind us. I heard something over the weekend that you need to know about. My girlfriend works at the Marriott downtown, and she heard some interesting gossip from the hotel staff. About Lydia and Evan? About what happened Friday night. Neil sat down across from me. Apparently, Lydia showed up at the hotel around 8 p.m., completely hysterical. She was looking for Evan, but he'd already checked out. The desk clerk said she was crying, screaming at them to tell her where he'd gone. And she caused such a scene that hotel security had to escort her out. But here's the interesting part. She kept saying that her husband had destroyed her life, and she was going to make him pay for it. I absorbed this information. Lydia was escalating, moving from desperate to potentially dangerous. That was concerning, but not entirely unexpected. Did your girlfriend say anything else? She said Lydia looked terrible, like she hadn't slept or eaten in days, and she was asking the hotel staff if they knew where she could find Evan Shore, if he'd left any forwarding information, things like that. So Evans abandoned her. Looks like it, which means she's alone, unemployed, financially ruined, and probably not thinking clearly. My desk phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Richard Evers. Calvin, I need you in my office immediately. Bring Neil with you. Evers' office felt tense when we walked in. He gestured for us to sit down and close the door. Gentlemen, we have a situation. Calvin, your wife was here this morning. Here? In the building? She tried to get past security around 7 a.m., claiming she needed to speak with you about an emergency. When security wouldn't let her up without an appointment, she became belligerent. She started screaming about how you destroyed her life, and she was going to destroy yours. I felt a chill run down my spine. What did security do? They escorted her off the property and informed her that she's banned from the building. But Calvin, she made some specific threats. She said she was going to tell everyone the truth about who you really are. She said you'd manipulated evidence and lied to people to make her look bad. Did anyone record this? Security cameras caught the whole thing. I've already made copies for your attorney and for the police, in case you want to file a restraining order. Neil leaned forward. The police? Calvin, your wife is exhibiting signs of mental instability. The threats, the erratic behavior, the public outbursts. I think you need to consider the possibility that she might try to hurt you or herself. I thought about Lydia as I'd known her for 15 years. Calm, organized, methodical. The kind of person who planned grocery lists and kept detailed calendars. The woman Evers was describing sounded like someone I'd never met. Richard, I appreciate your concern, but I think Lydia's just desperate. She's lost everything, and she's looking for someone to blame. Maybe, but desperate people do desperate things. Evers pulled out a business card. I want you to call this detective. Tell him what's been happening. Get it on record, just in case. I pocketed the card. Anything else? Yes. I'm assigning Neil to work with you on all your cases for the next week. I don't want you working alone or staying late, and I want you to park in the covered garage instead of the street. You think she's dangerous? I think she's unpredictable, and unpredictable people are always dangerous. Back at my desk, I called David Foster and filled him in on the morning's events. Calvin, I think your boss is right. We need to file for a restraining order immediately. Lydia's behavior is escalating, and we need to get ahead of it. What would that involve? A court hearing, probably this week. You'd present evidence of her threats and erratic behavior. The judge would issue an order requiring her to stay away from you, your workplace, your home. If she violates it, she gets arrested. How long does that take? Emergency restraining orders can be issued within 24 hours. I'll file the paperwork this afternoon. After I hung up, I sat quietly for a few minutes, thinking about how quickly everything had changed. A week ago, I'd been methodically destroying Lydia's reputation and financial security. Now I was worried about my physical safety. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but you don't know what's coming. I'm going to tell everyone who you really are. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Foster, then blocked the number. 2 minutes later, another text from a different number. You manipulated evidence. You lied to my parents. You destroyed my life for your own sick pleasure. Screenshot, forward, block. Then another. I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're a psychopath. Neil was watching me deal with the messages. How many phones does she have? Probably buying burner phones, or using other people's phones. I put my phone in airplane mode. It doesn't matter. Each message is more evidence for the restraining order. At noon, my desk phone rang. The caller ID showed Morrison and Associates. Calvin, this is Jim Morrison. I'm calling to give you a heads up about something. What's wrong? Lydia was here this morning. She tried to get into the building, claiming she needed to pick up personal items from her desk. But when Ashley wouldn't let her in without an appointment, she started making accusations. What kind of accusations? She claimed that you'd forced me to fire her by threatening to pull your company's business from us. She said you'd manipulated evidence to make her look bad and that I was part of some conspiracy against her. I rubbed my temples. Jim, you know that's not true. Of course I know it's not true. But Calvin, she was screaming these accusations in the parking lot where other tenants could hear her. She's trying to damage your reputation the same way you damaged hers. What did you tell her? I told her that her employment was terminated due to her own misconduct, and that she needed to leave the property immediately or I'd call the police. Morrison paused. Calvin, I think she's having some kind of breakdown. She looked terrible, and she was saying things that didn't make sense. After I hung up, I called Detective Martinez, the officer Evers had recommended. Detective, my name is Calvin Mercer. My boss suggested I call you about a domestic situation that's escalating. What kind of domestic situation? I spent 20 minutes walking Martinez through the entire timeline. The affair, the divorce filing, the evidence I'd gathered, and now Lydia's increasingly erratic behavior. Mr. Mercer, it sounds like you've been very thorough in documenting everything. That's going to help if we need to take action. What kind of action? Well, the threatening messages and the workplace harassment could constitute stalking under Connecticut law. Combined with a restraining order, that might be enough to get her into mandatory counseling. And if she doesn't comply, then she gets arrested. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. At 3 p.m., my phone rang. Dorothy Rowan. Calvin, I'm calling to apologize. Lydia came to our house this morning, and she's not well. What happened? She was ranting about how you'd turned everyone against her, how you'd manipulated evidence and lied to people. She kept saying that you were a psychopath who'd planned everything from the beginning. Dorothy's voice was shaky. Calvin, she scared me. She wasn't making sense, and she seemed dangerous. What did you do? Steve called the police. We had to have our own daughter removed from our property. Dorothy started crying. Calvin, what happened to her? The woman who was here this morning wasn't the daughter I raised. Dorothy, I'm sorry you had to go through that, but you did the right thing. Did I? Or did we push her over the edge by cutting her off? I thought about that question. Had the consequences I'd imposed on Lydia driven her to a mental breakdown? Or had the breakdown been inevitable once her carefully constructed lies started falling apart? Dorothy, Lydia made choices that hurt a lot of people. The fact that she's having trouble dealing with the consequences doesn't mean the consequences were wrong. I know, I keep thinking there must have been another way. There was. She could have told me the truth 3 months ago. She could have asked for a divorce instead of cheating. She could have taken responsibility for her actions instead of trying to blame everyone else. After I hung up, I realized that I was starting to feel something I hadn't expected. Pity. Not for what I'd done to Lydia, but for what she'd done to herself. The woman I'd married wouldn't have recognized the person she'd become. At 5 p.m., as Neil and I were preparing to leave the office, my phone rang one more time. Jenny Shore. Calvin, I thought you should know that Evan came by the house this afternoon. Is everything all right? He wanted to pick up some of his things, and he looked terrible, like he'd been living in his car. He kept asking if I'd heard from Lydia, if I knew where she was staying. What did you tell him? I told him I didn't care where she was, and that he wasn't welcome here anymore. But Calvin, he seemed scared. He kept saying that Lydia was texting him constantly, that she was blaming him for everything that happened. Did he say anything else? He said she'd threatened to tell his boss that he'd harassed her, that she'd make up stories about their relationship to destroy what was left of his career. Jenny paused. Calvin, I think they're turning on each other. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and considered the situation. Lydia was spiraling out of control, making threats and accusations that were increasingly disconnected from reality. Evan was scared and trying to distance himself from her, and I was in the middle of it all, the target of Lydia's rage and the architect of both their downfalls. Neil, I think we're about to see the final act of this drama. What do you mean? Lydia's running out of options. She's lost her job, her family, her boyfriend, her financial security. She's desperate, and desperate people either surrender or they attack. And you think she's going to attack? I looked at my phone, which had received 6 more threatening messages while I was talking to Jenny Shore. I think she already has. The restraining order was issued Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. By 11 a.m., Lydia had violated it. I was sitting in my office, reviewing the legal documents David Foster had filed when my desk phone rang. Margaret Henderson, my neighbor. Calvin, dear, I'm looking out my window, and there's a woman sitting in a car across from your house. She's been there for about an hour, just watching the house. Can you describe her? Well, it looks like Lydia, but, Calvin, she looks terrible. Her hair is a mess. She's wearing the same clothes she had on yesterday when she was pounding on your door. She was at my house yesterday. Oh, yes, around 8 p.m. She was banging on the door, shouting for you to come out and talk to her. When you didn't answer, she started walking around the house, looking in windows. I almost called the police. Margaret, I want you to call the police right now. Tell them there's someone violating a restraining order at 47 Maple Street. And Margaret, stay away from your windows until they get there. I hung up and immediately called Detective Martinez. Detective, this is Calvin Mercer. My ex-wife is currently violating the restraining order that was issued this morning. Where is she now? Sitting in a car outside my house, according to my neighbor. She was also at the house last night trying to get in. We'll send a unit over immediately. Mr. Mercer, where are you right now? At my office downtown. Good. Stay there until we call you. Don't go home until we've secured the situation. I called Neil over and filled him in on what was happening. Then I called David Foster. Calvin, this is actually good news. Violating a restraining order is a criminal offense. She'll be arrested, which means she'll be off the streets and hopefully get the mental health evaluation she clearly needs. What happens after that? Depends on what the evaluation shows. If she's found to be mentally unstable, she could be committed for observation. If not, she'll be charged with stalking and harassment. At 12:30, Detective Martinez called back. Mr. Mercer, we've arrested your ex-wife for violating the restraining order. She's being held pending a mental health evaluation. How did she react to being arrested? Not well. She was screaming about how you'd manipulated everyone, how you'd planted evidence, how this was all part of some elaborate plan to destroy her life. Martinez paused. Mr. Mercer, she had a notebook in her car filled with detailed plans for confronting you. Times when you leave for work, routes you take, places you go. She's been stalking you for days. I felt sick. What kind of plans? She'd written out scenarios for forcing you to admit that you'd lied about the affair, that you'd manipulated evidence to make her look bad. Some of the scenarios involved physical confrontation. She was planning to hurt me? It's hard to say. The plans were rambling, disorganized, not entirely coherent. But yes, some of them involved forcing you to recant your accusations through intimidation or violence. After I hung up, I sat quietly for a few minutes, trying to process what I'd just learned. The woman I'd been married to for 15 years had been planning to physically confront me, possibly hurt me, to force me to lie about her affair. Neil brought me a cup of coffee and sat down. You okay? I don't know. I keep thinking about the person I married versus the person who was sitting outside my house with a notebook full of plans to hurt me. How does someone change that much? Maybe they don't change. Maybe you just finally see who they really were. That afternoon, I received a call from Dr. Sarah Williams, the psychiatrist who'd evaluated Lydia. Mr. Mercer, I'm calling to give you an update on your wife's condition. She's been admitted for a 72-hour psychiatric hold. What's wrong with her? She's experiencing what we call a narcissistic collapse. When someone with narcissistic tendencies faces consequences for their actions, they sometimes have a complete psychological breakdown. They can't accept that they're responsible for their problems, so they create elaborate conspiracy theories to explain why everyone has turned against them. Is she dangerous? Potentially. She's expressed fantasies about forcing you to publicly admit that you lied about her affair. She believes that if she can just make you confess to manipulating evidence, everyone will forgive her and her life will go back to normal. But I didn't manipulate evidence. I know that, and you know that, but she can't accept that reality. In her mind, the affair was justified because you weren't a good enough husband. The lies were necessary because you wouldn't understand. The financial deception was acceptable because it was her money too. What happens now? She'll be evaluated for the full 72 hours. If she's still considered a danger to herself or others, we can extend the hold. If not, she'll be released with mandatory outpatient counseling. And if she refuses counseling, then she goes to jail for violating the restraining order. That evening, I drove home to a house that felt truly peaceful for the first time in months. The police had removed Lydia's car, and Detective Martinez had assured me that patrol units would be driving by regularly for the next few days. I was making dinner when my phone rang. Jenny Shore. Calvin, I thought you should know that Evan was arrested this afternoon. Arrested? For what? Apparently Lydia called his boss and accused him of harassment. She claimed he'd forced her into the affair by threatening to hurt her family if she didn't comply. That's insane. I know. But Evan panicked when he heard about the accusation. He went to Lydia's hotel to confront her, and when he found out she'd been arrested, he completely lost it. He trashed the hotel room, threw furniture around, broke a window. So he was arrested for property damage? And for making threats against you. Apparently, he told the hotel staff that this was all your fault, and he was going to make you pay for destroying his life. I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine. In the space of one day, both Lydia and Evan had been arrested. The affair that had started as their secret pleasure had ended with both of them in custody, facing criminal charges and psychiatric evaluation. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Calvin, this is Karen, Lydia's sister. I wanted to apologize for what my sister has put you through. I saw her today at the hospital, and she's not the person I grew up with. I'm sorry. I typed back, Thank you, Karen. I hope she gets the help she needs. Can I ask you something? Do you think she can recover from this? Do you think she can ever be normal again? I thought about that question for a long time before answering. I think that depends on whether she can accept responsibility for her choices. If she can do that, then maybe. But if she keeps blaming everyone else for the consequences of her actions, then no. What about you? Can you ever forgive her? Karen, forgiveness isn't about what she deserves. It's about what I need to move on with my life. And right now, I need to focus on rebuilding instead of looking backward. I understand. Take care of yourself, Calvin. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows and the sound of birds in the oak tree outside. For the first time in months, I'd slept through the night without waking up worried about where Lydia was or what she was doing. I made coffee and sat on my back deck, looking out at the yard I'd been planning to renovate for years, but had never found the time. Now I had all the time in the world. My phone rang. David Foster. Calvin, I have news. Lydia's attorney called this morning. She wants to settle the divorce immediately, no contest. What does that mean? It means she's agreeing to all our terms. You keep the house, the retirement accounts, everything. She's not asking for alimony, not fighting the asset division, nothing. Why the sudden change? Because her attorney explained that fighting the divorce would require her to present evidence that the affair didn't happen, and she can't do that. Plus, her criminal charges make her a very unsympathetic plaintiff. So it's over? The legal part, yes. The divorce will be final in 30 days. After I hung up, I sat quietly on my deck, drinking coffee and thinking about the past month. I'd set out to make Lydia and Evan pay for their betrayal, and I'd succeeded beyond my wildest expectations. They'd both lost their jobs, their marriages, their reputations, and their freedom. They'd learned that actions have consequences, that lies eventually surface, and that betraying someone's trust comes with a price. But sitting there in the morning sunshine, I realized that the most important thing I'd accomplished wasn't destroying their lives. It was reclaiming my own. For months, I'd been living as the victim of someone else's choices. The fool who didn't know his wife was cheating, the man everyone pitied behind his back. Now I was the man who'd fought back intelligently, who'd refused to be a victim, who'd made sure the truth came to light. My phone buzzed with a text from Neil. "How are you feeling this morning?" I typed back. "Like a man who's finally free to build the life he actually wants." Any regrets? I thought about that question as I finished my coffee. Did I regret exposing Lydia's affair? Did I regret the systematic destruction of her reputation and financial security? Did I regret the fact that she was now in a psychiatric hospital, facing criminal charges and the complete collapse of her life? No regrets, I typed. She made her choices. I just made sure everyone knew what those choices were. And that was the truth. Lydia had chosen to betray our marriage, to lie to my face for months, to steal my money to fund her affair, and to try to destroy my career when I found out about it. I had simply chosen to make sure those choices had consequences. The sun was getting higher, and I had a full day ahead of me. There were legal documents to sign, a house to renovate, and a life to rebuild. But for the first time in months, those felt like opportunities rather than obligations. I stood up, finished my coffee, and walked back into the house that was finally completely mine. Justice, it turned out, was even more satisfying than I'd imagined.